This is the TriDot Podcast. TriDot uses your training data and genetic profile combined with predictive analytics and artificial intelligence to optimize your training, giving you better results in less time with fewer injuries. Our podcast is here to educate, inspire, and entertain. We'll talk all things triathlon with expert coaches and special guests. Join the conversation and let's improve together.
Hey folks, welcome to a new episode of the TriDot Podcast. I'm Andrew, the average triathlete, voice of the people, and captain of the middle of the pack. I'm joined today by TriDot coach and professional triathlete Elizabeth James. Elizabeth is a USAT Level 2 and Ironman U certified coach who quickly rose through the triathlon ranks using TriDot, from a beginner to top age grouper to a professional triathlete. She's a Kona and Boston Marathon qualifier who has coached triathletes with TriDot since 2014. So Elizabeth, it is just you and me today as we do our third ever revisiting of a previous podcast episode. Elizabeth, do you want to do the honors and kind of tell everybody which TriDot podcast episode we will be revisiting today?
Ooh, yes, please. I would love to introduce that. So today we are revisiting TriDot's preseason project, how athletes help revolutionize triathlon training. And I am so excited to revisit this episode, this topic, and really this research.
That's right. It was episode 13 of the podcast. And just for a little background for our listeners, some of you have maybe already heard one of our revisiting episodes. Some of you maybe have not heard a revisiting episode. But basically, there are just some topics out there that we've already covered on the podcast that we feel are just crucial to TriDot training, crucial to triathlon training, crucial to our listeners. And so from time to time, we're over 100 episodes now. And so from time to time, we just want to kind of re-bring up these important topics to you, our listeners. And if you've already heard episode 13 of the podcast, this will be a nice refresher for you. If you have not heard that one in our catalog of episodes that we have, you're going to learn a lot about how TriDot training has been refined over the years from this annual research project that we do. And so, this is going to be a really interesting episode that really dives into the research TriDot has done and continues to do to dial in athlete training to perfection. Every athlete that has participated or will participate in the preseason project is actively contributing to making the training better and better for all of us. The preseason project, here's how I view it. It's a win-win-win. New athletes coming into TriDot for the project win because they get 2 months of free TriDot training. TriDot wins because he gets to learn from studying the data those athletes provide over the 2 months. And existing TriDot athletes win because we benefit from the training implications TriDot learns each year from this annual research study. So huge wins all around, and I'm excited to revisit this episode with Elizabeth. So here's how today will work. Elizabeth and I will have a fresh warm-up question today. We will do a fresh cool down where Elizabeth and I kind of kick around what we learned from revisiting this episode as we listen to it again. And in between that, you will hear the original recording where I interviewed TriDot founder Jeff Boer and coach John Mayfield as we talked about what the preseason project is and how it has just revolutionized triathlete training over the years. So it's going to be a great episode. Back on episode 104 of the podcast, it was a pleasure to have Oxford University professor Kieran Clark, founder and CEO of T Delta S Global, talk with us about the performance and health benefits of drinking the revolutionary Oxford ketone ester called Delta G. Professor Clark led the effort to develop Delta G, which is now available in 3 strengths, 10 grams for health, 25 grams for performance, and 32 grams of raw ester for that extra mile. Delta G is a powerful fuel source that augments physical performance, sharpens mental acuity, and supports your metabolic health. I recently tried the Delta G 25-gram ketone performance drink for a 20-minute bike power test. With Delta G in my system, I averaged 4 watts higher than I was expecting with a lower heart rate than I typically have during an FTP session. I'm excited to continue using Delta G in my own race prep. So head to deltagketones.com and try Delta G for yourself. At deltagketones.com, they even offer free 15-minute one-on-one consultations where you can learn more, ask questions, and have those questions answered. And you'll receive a free bottle of Delta G with your order. So again, that's deltagketones.com and use the code TRIDOT20 to get 20% off your Super Fuel Delta G ketone drinks.
Time to warm up. Let's get moving.
When we revisit an episode, we also like to revisit its warm-up question as well. Now, back on episode 13, we had a suntan/sunburn related question, and this is what it asked. With all the hours triathletes spend outside training and on the race course, tan lines and sunburns are basically a rite of passage into the sport. For the most part, we all end up with a fairly defined lines showing where our socks and sleeves came to an end. But beyond that, we all have at least one story of a more extreme tan line or sunburn that was extra special. So Elizabeth, for our warm-up question today, tell me about a time where you got a memorable mark from too much time in the sun.
All right. Yes. Well, I do spend plenty of time in the sun, and I absolutely love being outside. I also tan very easily, so I've definitely had some funny tan lines over the years. I remember listening to Jeff and John's answers to this question when the episode first came out, and two things kind of came to mind to me. So one, I think the most memorable tan line that I had was a sunglasses tan from a long run session. So my face was very tan except for two very light circles around my eyes, and it was absolutely a raccoon type look. And gosh, like Charles and I went out to dinner with a bunch of his buddies from work, and definitely was an awkward kind of introduction. People that I hadn't met before, and I'm there with like,
they're like, why do you look so weird?
Yeah,
why do you look funny?
Like, oh. And nothing that like makeup was gonna help really cover up. It was very obvious that there was there was a line there. And then two, when I was training for my first Ironman in 2015, I was working with a massage therapist, kind of primarily on my lower legs. I had a very tight calf through that training build, so I was doing kind of some targeted 30-minute sessions on my legs. And a couple weeks prior to racing, my shoulders were really tight after a tough swim session. So I went in to that same massage therapist to have him help me with my shoulders and back. And while I remembered the massage therapist had like moved the sheet to work on my back, and he could see the tan lines from my swimsuit, and the therapist's reaction was just hilarious to me. He's like, holy bleep. He's like, you are so much more white than I thought. And he couldn't stop laughing. He had only seen me with a very dark skin tone from the summer of training, and he was just shocked, probably blinded by the fluorescent white of the skin that never saw the sun there.
Well, and you have to imagine he's probably somebody who gets, very similar, marathon, triathlete, endurance athletes that I'm sure he works with. And so even somebody who is in that practice and in that trade where he sees people's skin tones and backs, to get that reaction from him, I'm sure just really is telling of how extreme that tan line was in that particular season of your training. So I remember working with you, Elizabeth, a few years back when it was the dead of Texas summer, when you, me, John Mayfield, Coach Jeff Rains, we were out at a track here in Texas, and we were filming the run drills. So when athletes are training with TriDot, and the videos that pop up in the app to show them how to do a specific run drill, that is yourself and Jeff Rains are in those videos showing us how to do the run drills properly. In that particular day, like you started that day tan, and then we spent a couple hours in the middle of the day in the sun, and you ended that day just tanner than I've seen anybody, that I train with. And it's something. When you go back and look at that footage, I mean, Jeff Rains looks very normal. He's very natural skin tones in those videos. And you look like you had done an Ironman the weekend prior, but before we filmed. So anyway, hey guys, we're going to throw this out to you. Part of why I love revisiting these warm-up questions is when we first started the podcast, I don't know why we didn't think to do it, but we didn't throw these questions out to you, our audience, on Facebook like we do now. Every single Monday, we take our warm-up question and we throw it out to the audience to see what you guys have to say. So I have not heard your stories on this, and I'm excited to hear from you. What was a reaction that you got that was very Elizabeth James-like, where somebody was like, oh my gosh, look at that tan line. What was an extreme sunburn or tan line that you had while you were training or racing triathlon?
On to the main set. Going in 3, 2, 1.
It's for sure a bold statement to say that TriDot's preseason project athletes have helped revolutionize triathlon training. But once you've begun training with TriDot, you quickly find this statement to be true. TriDot's training structure changes the way training plans are generated. It changes the way athletes train, and it changes the way coaches coach, all for the better. And the best part of it all that we're going to focus on today is this. TriDot does all of this with your data and your feedback. Today, Jeff and John are going to show us how TriDot's athletes through the years of preseason project are the ones empowering the TriDot training revolution. So, John, why don't you kick us off by describing for those who don't know what TriDot's preseason project is in the form we know it today?
So, preseason project is a year-long research study that we do every year. It runs from the preseason, which is generally defined as late October through February, and then into the race season. So qualified participants get 2 free months of TriDot training. The qualifications are pretty simple. You have to have raced a triathlon before. You have to be racing at least an Olympic distance race in the season to come, not be a coach and not be a pro. And all those things are put in place to maintain quality of the research that we do. That helps us standardize the data so that we can evaluate and have a legitimate study here and draw meaningful conclusions from it. So the purpose of preseason project is again, it further optimizes the TriDot training, and then we're also able to demonstrate the incremental gains of those that train with TriDot and compare those to those that do not.
Well, I'm excited to hear a lot more about this. When I first came on as an athlete, I still remember the day about a year and a half ago when I first saw the ad on Facebook for TriDot training, preseason project, get 2 months TriDot training free in return in exchange for, your data. And I remember seeing it. My first thought was like, oh, that has I was excited about it because I actually at the time was looking for a structured way to train. And when I saw that ad, I was like, okay, I'm going to try it for 2 months. That's a very generous amount of time to get to try a training program. But I thought it was kind of a marketing gimmick. Right, I'm like, okay, they're saying they need my data, but they just want me to try their training for 2 months so that I'll like it, so that I'll be willing to pay for it after the 2 months. And then I got on, involved as an athlete, and I started learning. Oh man, like there is just what you said, John. There is so much benefit for TriDot in the athletes' data that we receive from the preseason project. So I'm really excited to dive into this, talk a little bit more about that. I have all sorts of questions, like why do we do this in the preseason? How and why are the athletes qualified? How can you afford to give your product away for free for 2 months to so many athletes? How does preseason project help TriDot improve and quantify things like training effectiveness? How many athletes have participated in the preseason project? I have tons of questions, John.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. So, man, that last one is one of the really cool ones. So, as I said before, this is a research program in the triathlon space. So and there have been lots of those over the years, but your normal sample size, if you go in and read a triathlon related study, typically your N is N equals 10, N equals 12, your sample size, how many people they're testing, and drawing conclusions and then applying them to everyone, typically is fewer than 20. I would say
Wow.
your standard sample size is anywhere from single digits to maybe a couple dozen.
And you even think on the generous end of what you just said would be 100. And within 100 different athletes, there might be 4 or 5 that are like you or like me to learn from.
And even then, generally what they're doing is they're qualifying their participants. They're looking for athletes that meet a particular definition or demographic. And then they're doing research on them.
It's 20 highly trained cyclists or 20 untrained cyclists, and they do the study. So it's at one end of the spectrum or the other.
And then they apply the findings across the board to everyone. So one of the things that really differentiates preseason project is the sample size. So we have actually had over 15,000 athletes participate in the preseason project over the last several years.
That's a big group.
Yeah, and that equates to over $3 million in value of the training that has been given away.
So in all those 2 free months of training to that many athletes, that's about $3 million of free training TriDot's given.
Yeah, because the training program that we give away for 2 months is there is a known cost of that. It's $99 a month. So each athlete is receiving $200 in benefit, $200 worth of free training. So yeah, $3 million in free training that's been given out.
I mean, that's absolutely an astounding number, like when you hear it quantified, right?
And so based on that, what we want to do is recognize the contribution of all these past participants, these 15,000 athletes that have made TriDot better. We want to acknowledge that and pass along appreciation.
All the athletes who are alumni of the preseason project.
Yeah, and then give our current preseason project participants an appreciation for all that's gone into it. So this is based on more than 15,000 athletes, and we've had 15,000 in the preseason project, and that's not all the athletes that have provided data. So again, we have thousands of athletes that are providing data. So these athletes that are new to preseason project and new to TriDot training, they're able to see this is actually what their training is based on. Their training isn't based on one person's theory or one person's philosophy or education or experience. It's actual analysis of data from thousands of athletes. So we're not looking at a small sample size or one person's opinion. It's actual data from thousands of triathletes.
I mean, that's one of the things that I've, the more I learn about TriDot, the more I get excited about. You see the numbers on the website of training with TriDot will help you improve this many times and all of that. I mean, this is the data that is quantifying those type of statistics. So, just as an athlete, you love seeing that there's actual learning and there's actual science and there's actual a quantified way of figuring out that data. That it's not just empty claims, right?
Yeah, and we can highlight some of those milestones and results and really how those benefits have changed the way that we train, the way we race, and the way that we coach triathletes.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Jeff, why don't you just start by describing how it began? I would love for you and John to just walk us through how the preseason project has emerged into what it is today. So take me back to day one. Where did this all come from?
Yeah, actually, it started before it started. So there was an origin that we built on later that became preseason project. Yeah, back in 2011, and back then, all of the training analysis, the sample sizes were bigger. They were hundreds, not thousands, and it was a very iterative process. So we'd do training phases or periods of time where we'd have the algorithms and the thresholds and all of the things that we did to optimize the training set. And then we watch a big cohort of athletes go through the training, measure results, make adjustments, and then do it again. And so we started in 2011. It was just a continuation of that normal process, but it was really benchmarking and measuring the effectiveness of TriDot at that time. We'd spent 6-7 years to that point, normalizing all the iterations, doing the standardization, adding context, abstracting the algorithms based on different demographics to affect the training decisions made. And that would later lead to the full scale. So this is kind of all the preparatory work leading to the big data stuff that we do today. So before there was a project at all per se, we were just doing this. And the focus of that time was really measuring the off season, as we called it, because that was just an extremely important time of the year to do the analysis.
And so why is that? Why is that kind of the more important time of year to do that?
Well, you might recall from episode 10, the power stamina paradox.
Yeah.
During the off season, when you're not training for another event, another race, you're able to focus on the training that needs to be done to increase functional threshold or work on form. And it doesn't have the influences of someone doing a race in 3 weeks. So they can't really do what they should do to improve their performance. They need to either taper, get ready for the race, or recover from a race. And so it's that time, it's several months, where you can get a big group of athletes that's gonna have very pure training and with one objective.
Yeah.
And so that was real important. So it removes that racing impact on your schedule, allows you to isolate based on FTP and form improvement. And the challenge then was finding athletes that were serious. A lot of athletes, quit and stopped training consistently during the off season. And so we really tried to impress upon the athletes the importance of that off season training and prove how much you could improve. During that time.
I mean, that's a distinguishment when I came in. I mean, I think most athletes view, that time in the winter months when there's not races, they view that as an off season. Whereas here at TriDot, we call that it's the preseason project.
Originally is off season, and we were in exactly right. And so we changed it, and that'll kind of come in the future years, that recognition and the way to how do we communicate that. So this was not named at the time; it was just a thing we did. But it was a 20 that we retroactively look back for years. It was the 2011 off season, and so we had that time was just very precious and priceless.
So how big was that group of athletes that you really started looking at?
It was right at 100 athletes. They were all 30 to 55 was probably 80% of them, 90% of them.
I make the cut. 31 years old. I made the cut.
And that was ones that were the training had to be the average was about 14 weeks. Give or take a week or two. We normalized it to have consistent results. And then the other thing is they couldn't be doing a half or full marathon. A lot of people do marathons in the cool, so we had to filter out those people.
Because that would skew.
Because their training objectives would be different. And so we ended up with about 100 at that time.
So how did it go with that first study, with that first 100?
It was back then, we did the 800 meter time trial.
It was an 800 meter time trial?
So we didn't do the CSS 400, 200.
An 800? Oh, man.
So
I'm never going to complain about the 400 ever again.
So here's the time trial results. So for 800, it was a 2 minute and 23 second improvement over that 14 weeks. For the 15-mile bike time trial, it was 3 minutes and 11 seconds faster. For the 10K, it was 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
I mean,
that's 14 weeks. Yeah,
that's
a little
significant.
More than absolutely.
I mean, if you're taking off, 32 seconds per mile off your run split, that's, for that 15-mile bike, 3 minutes, just for perspective for folks, that's adding 2 miles per hour.
Yep.
All of us would dream of adding 2 miles per hour to our functional threshold.
Yeah, I guess the rates are a little easier to understand. 800, that's 17.8 seconds. So about 18 seconds per 100 faster on your threshold, 2.1 miles an hour faster, and 32 seconds per mile on your 10K pace. So those are very, very significant. Yeah,
I would call that super successful for all of those athletes. So was that kind of the results you expected?
It was. This is the first time with a bigger group. Like he said, we have 20, 40, and then none of them are the same. So this week we're already seeing some little groups within the groups of who's improving more and why. But we needed to scale this further. So the results were great. We needed to scale it, and we needed to figure out how to communicate the results. Because when we say this, we did a lot of webinars and different things telling people, and they just didn't believe you.
Yeah.
So it's like, so that was a challenge coming out of that year. So this is going into 2012. During 2012, how do we communicate it, and then how do we just get more athletes through? So now we've refined even further, make adjustments based on that, and so we move forward to 2012.
Yeah. So with the fresh lessons that you learned from that very first year, what happened in the sophomore, 2012 campaign of Preseason Project?
Well, that was a big year going, actually 2012 going into 2013. We were struggling to find a way to share it with more people. Like, how do we get more people to experience this? One, we want it for them, but two, we want more people because we need more data. More data, we can eliminate more noise. We can be more granular with the training, the measurements. Back then, so many athletes just relied on the education level of a coach or a success of a pro or just really accomplished athlete. Oh, they must know how to train, even though I'm nothing like them or maybe like them. They did whatever. So it was very hard to communicate what we're doing and where does our credibility come from, these results. But then, and the cool thing was, like, we could repeat the results. We knew it. We did it. We do these same things from year to year, and we're getting better and better and better because it's a repeatable process based on the data. So when we went out there, we try to highlight, well, you have these experts, a world champion here and a world champion there. They're both very successful, but they're telling you two different things about your training.
Oh, two very different things.
And they're not repeatable. So how, if what they're saying is the best way to train, then all of their athletes should be doing better.
And
but they're not.
Pro athletes, start telling you how they train. It's like, well, you're a pro. Like,
different genetics, different age, different.
You should be training differently than me.
Things. And so that was kind of the battle that how do we explain and share? So we're trying to educate. We thought about sponsoring a big time pro, but we didn't want to go that route. So explain it to them and say, here's how it works, and let them use it. Again, the algorithms are certainly fast enough for a pro. We've had 350 half Ironman times and 830 full Ironman. So it's real fast, but we're gearing toward the age group or the elite, the age grouper that wants to, I don't want to say the elite, but the one that wants to improve.
Yeah.
If you care about a goal, I don't care if it's a finishing goal.
If you want to get faster on less time with fewer injuries.
That was our sweet spot. That's who we wanted to go after. So we didn't want to go. Plus just the ethical issue. I don't feel comfortable relying on someone else's past accomplishment and somehow trying to transfer a relay because they were a world champion back in the day or even currently. They didn't do that using TriDot. If they didn't get here using our product, I don't want them to sponsor and promote it. I'm happy for them to say, hey, this is great, looks good, but not in the sense of, trust me because I'm so fast, then you use it. They didn't use it.
I'm a pro. I'm being paid to endorse this, so you should use it. But
we're left with still the problem exists. All the traditional routes, other than just trying to educate people and explain and get attention to, how do you
get the word out?
How do you understand? So when people take time and pause and understand, then they go, okay. Or if they heard word of mouth from a person, they're understanding. And that's a very slow process, and we needed more data. So we really had a breakthrough. As I was working with a consultant on just a number of things, strategic. And after several months, we were just really struggling. And he called me or texted me super early and said, hey, I got it. Let's talk. And so he saw, and he came up with this brilliant model. He goes, actually, he's a new parent. I had a couple young kids and wanted to raise them right and just be a good dad. And he said, I heard this thing on the radio. They said that if you buy their kid programs, like $350, raising kids, you pay your money, you get it, you go through the first 2 chapters, fill out the work at the back, they give you a little assignment, do this with your kid and whatever, you fill them out, send them in, we'll give you all your money back. So you get this training program for free. And he goes, it's so cool. I think that'll work. Because one, you have skin in the game.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm committed. And if you're not committed, then that's on you, not on us. We're doing our part. We're making it available. Anyway, so that we worked through it. We spent probably 2 full months working through the details. We actually found the lady that set that up for that company. And she was gracious enough to work through some of the
and kind of talk through how to create a program like that for TriDot.
Here's operational things. Here's the practical things you never think of that becomes a problem. Here's how you make it clear to athletes. Everyone's skeptical coming in, so here's how you present it in a very transparent way, so there's no surprises. But it was extremely costly. We spent 2 months, he and I, literally almost full time, just putting that together, the infrastructure, how it works, how do we market it. So there's a whole lot of cost, a whole lot of risk in the time. And what if it flops? What if in the fear at that time was we're bootstrapping. We don't have a lot of cash. So we spend all this time, all this money, promote it. Then what if everybody out there does it and gets their money back and quits?
Yeah.
Okay, now that was the data is good, but if they're not continuing,
because you're promising that option.
we need some portion of them to continue.
Yeah.
We're willing to make the investment up front, and for the long game, that's always been, we're playing the long game. And the feedback that we got from it, so it wasn't just the data, it was actually their feedback. And he said probably the most valuable thing that's going to come out of this is not their data feedback, although that is valuable, but their comments of what did they understand? Why didn't they adhere to the training? What was confusing?
Yeah.
What did they not understand? And we learned a lot from all of that, just baggage that they were coming in with.
So you come up with a program and you work through it. I mean, how did you get word out there to athletes that this was now available?
Well, when we started looking at that again, either doing webinars and all these different things. He actually told me when I was dealing with some of those fear things, he goes, well, do you believe in the product or not? It was kind of okay. I know it's going to do what it is. And that was kind of what pushed me over, okay, let's commit all this time and money to do this. Because I knew that some would continue. And I knew that for years I was, again, passion.
And we're all here today because we continued.
Correct. And so just, took the plunge. So I partnered. I had a lot of friends in the industry with, total Terry Laughlin, TI, swimming, effortless swimming, FCA endurance, endurance films, Bobby McGee, folks at UCAN, just people we've been working with for a long time. And I said, hey, let's do a co-promotional webinar on a specific topic and just give some value out there and talk about swim form improvement or nutrition or whatever it is. At the end, I want to throw this thing. We figured out this name for it. It was called Free for Feedback.
Free training in exchange for your feedback.
Yeah, you give us your feedback, your data and your comments, and they had a little survey they'd fill in, send it to us, and then we give them all their money back.
Wow.
When we did it, we kind of got the infrastructure in place. We had, I think, 228 that year. And the feedback was just incredible. We have a team, and they went through every single packet that got sent back, all of the questionnaires, all of the answers. So that not only did it give us scale for the algorithms on that side, but the most impactful stuff that year was their feedback and their comments of what was confusing and what thoughts and beliefs did they come into it with that we had to either re-educate or overcome or somehow get them to look at it a different way and see that and have the aha moments.
Yeah, and so the sample size just from year 1 to year 2, I mean, already more than doubled. What did those new athletes see in their results?
It was the same. It was kind of crazy. And it's funny. Every year they're about the same or a little bit better. And so it's
Wow.
just gradually moving. And the big thing there, because we didn't change a whole lot from the first to the second, it was really great. And the other thing is that we didn't have that comparison group. So this was the first year we were going to have a comparison group where we had some people that continued to use TriDot and other people that didn't. And so that was a benefit in future years, but that came out of this year. So the biggest objectives in that year, going into, I guess it was the year after 2013-14, was to demonstrate the improvement based on their feedback. So any negative comment that we got, any confusion, any friction point, our goal going into that next year, leading into 2014, was to eliminate the friction. So we had people had these huge, 3-minute increases in their bike or their 5K run, and then we'd see a comment, yeah, but my 8 mile, is slower now, and we had to educate them. Okay, you don't need to be doing 8 miles in January when you're doing a half marathon in August.
Yeah.
And that whole back to that power stamina paradox, and understanding there's different types of training. If you're out there trying to push your 8 miles and you're not that fast of an athlete, that's a very long run.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that much faster your threshold. And then during that year, we were also working on our Race X. And so we had these athletes coming in, and so that extending the study and the research and how we track. That first year, it was only the off season by itself, and so we were trying to quantify the benefits of racing in the off season compared to only in the in season. So
training in the off season versus training in season.
Correct. So being diligent in the off season, being diligent in season, being diligent in both, and measuring that. Another big change during that year was based on the feedback. Was we added back then we had gold, silver, bronze levels of how much everything was all coached. There's no non-coached option for TriDot at that point. So TriDot handled the algorithms and the optimization of the training design, but you also worked with a coach to handle a lot of those questions and to work with the athletes as a person. And then in that year, we had a whole bunch of people. That was part of the decoupling point that we've mentioned on other podcasts, where we're separating the necessity of a coach to optimize your training. So the training can be optimized by technology. You don't need a coach for that. Coaches can help. They can tweak. They can do other things. And there's a whole lot of things beyond optimization of training that coaches do. So we're not suggesting that at all. But that's when we first started offering what we called then a copper subscription. There's a little less, better price point, help more people have access to quality training.
So this is now year 3, 2013, 2014 season that you're starting to kind of work out the program of what it was like to train with TriDot.
And so it presents challenges. So now you don't have a coach to help educate. So now we're having to put systems and educational things in place to help educate the athletes who don't have access to a coach for budget or for whatever. But we have more athletes, so that's increasing our numbers. So we have more data, more feedback.
So this is one of the things that we've always wanted to accomplish through Preseason Project, is get that very valuable feedback from the athletes. That's that original title of Free for Feedback, and that intent has never gone away. So there were athletes that were asking for subscription options without the coach, and a lot of it revolved around budget. So again, we were able to respond to the customer desire, customer wish, and create that subscription. So this was something that enabled TriDot to reach more athletes, because now we're able to offer a lower price subscription option, and that's something that we've continued to do and continue to innovate throughout our history. And it's always been a priority. It's something that we wanted to do is provide a affordable option for athletes of any budget to be able to have individualized, optimized training. And this is really where it came from, was way back many years ago, responding to feedback from athletes that were participating in the Preseason Project.
So John, how did it go with, you got the feedback from athletes, and you guys kind of came up with those new objectives on, hey, based on the feedback we're starting to get, these are the things we want to change. How did it go with that first objective that you wanted to improve from the 2013 feedback? So
the feedback was actually really encouraging. 83% had either a 4 or 5 on their evaluation on that 5-point scale. 97% were 3 or higher. So what that told us was we were doing things right, but there was room for improvement. And
most people, they liked it, they loved it, they were on board, they had some thoughts.
Yeah. And like anything, it was still new. It was still under construction. A lot of it was still, what we thought was clear, or what we thought was explained, or what would work for us, kind of a thing. And when we found out that what we thought was good was maybe not good for everybody. So something we've always done, and to this day, is resolve to improve, and that's still one of our core values.
Yeah, one of the things, John, I'm sure you can elaborate on this more because you tell me more often, having more interaction with our athletes, is we found that the higher the ranking, the more engaged the athlete was. And it was when they didn't understand, didn't have a question, that it was a lack of generally correlated with a lack of engagement on their part. They hadn't entered a race, they hadn't entered assessments, they didn't engage somehow.
Higher the ranking being the more they liked TriDot. The higher they were ranking.
If they did stuff. And that was that skin in the game.
Yeah.
Where, look, so some of them were just filling out the paperwork, sending it back, but they didn't do anything. They didn't listen to a webinar. They didn't, engage in their training, but they still wanted to, get their money back. So they did that. So we saw that high correlation, and we knew that engagement was the key. And I still think we see that today.
So people were getting out of it what they put into it. The more they put in, the more they were.
But that continues to be valuable feedback for us that we want to improve on. We want to make it easy for athletes to engage. So we continue to thrive off the feedback that we're getting from thousands of athletes every year, in that we want our product to be approachable and easy and enjoyable. We know the training works. So we want to remove any barriers that we can, even like I mentioned a minute ago, the financial aspect of it. We want to provide subscription options that are affordable for every budget. And we want to make it clear and understandable whether you're internet savvy or whether you're not so much, whether you're resistant to technology. We don't want that to be a barrier either. So again, we thrive on this feedback, and we have a commitment to perpetual improvement and just continuing to make the product and the experience better. Both the training is better from the data that the athletes provide, and then the user experience is better from the feedback that is provided as well.
Jeff, you mentioned that another objective from that third year of the preseason project was to measure the impact or the value of training in the off season versus just training during the racing season. What was kind of the results of looking into that?
Yeah, again, so the understanding of this and kind of where we're going is really important, that you understand that power stamina, that you have times of the year where you have to develop that going long capacity. You have your threshold that you can push early in the season, preseason, off season.
Like a few months out from an Ironman, you've got to focus on stamina.
You got to go long. You're going long, and so much of your ability to absorb training and improve fitness is going longer, which is at the expense of something else.
So when you're farther out, you can, in the off season, you can focus on
power. And so we're breaking that up. So that's the key this year. So in that 2011-12 study where there's these big improvements, but then, well, how does that relate? Does that mean I'm going to race faster in 4 months after that ends, 5 months? So that was kind of the focus here. We do a whole lot of little studies, but this is kind of the highlighted one from this year, and we call it subset 7. It was about, this one was 89 athletes that only did 70.3 races. So they didn't do another running, they didn't do a sprint. So it was this pure period of time where they started, they did assessments, they trained, and then they did a race that I think the average was about 168 days, 24 weeks.
Getting ready for that 70.3.
Correct. And the ages were 18 to 76, average was 44, 63% male, 37 female. So we had and this was the first, like I mentioned earlier, the baseline groups. So we have a group of people who gave us their assessments, they told us what races they're doing, and they didn't ever start. So we have this did not start.
They never started training with TriDot. So that's the baseline group you're comparing TriDot training.
That's one. So that's baseline group 1, did not start.
Okay.
Baseline group 2 is the ones that come in the off season. That training period was about 58 days on average. So that's the 2 months. All right. And then we have another group that.
And then they stop after 2 months.
And then they stop. They go do their own thing.
Okay.
And then you have another group that was not part of Free for Feedback. And they just, come spring 3 months out, hey, I want to start training for this race. And they started using TriDot. So they started, and that's what most people were doing, still do at the time. About 3-4 months out, they start getting serious about the training.
And so you have big enough sample sizes in each of those groups
Correct.
To start comparing how are they progressing in their training based on how much they're doing.
And then we had the other group that started during the off season and the Free for Feedback, and then they kept doing it all the way up to their race. So now we have people that we have assessments and race results for people who didn't start, those who only did the 2 months free, those that skipped the 2 months free, only trained during the in season, and then the fourth group, the ones that did it all. So it was pretty good. And that was for 70. Actually, the Ironman group, we didn't have anyone that stopped using TriDot. So that was great. They started doing the in season, that was free, and I go, okay. So that was pretty cool. But for the 70.3 group, everything's pretty proportional. The improvements, and so they translate very well. So this baseline group, we learned that the off-season training was more impactful on race results than the in-season training.
And so many athletes, like they just kind of, they're a little, they train in the off season. They probably a little inconsistent. They think they're resting up, and they really think that when they get 3-4 months out from race day, those are the key sessions.
Right.
And so you're telling me that.
And they're not. That they've already created their ceiling.
Yeah.
So now they're just getting to do their stamina, their 70% or whatever percent.
So off-season training helps you raise the ceiling.
And that's really a misunderstanding of that power stamina paradox. And that really comes down to.
That's exactly right. And so the numbers, so that off-season period was 58 days. Those athletes improved their race results an average of 18 minutes and 39 seconds.
Over a half Ironman.
Over a half Ironman. Those that did the in-season only, that period is 75 days. So it's, 25% more time? It was a longer period. It's only 18 minutes.
So very marginal.
So the ones that did the free 2 hours and then did their own thing.
The free 2 months.
Yes, the free 2 months. And then did their own thing, improved more than those that did more time leading up to their race. But did their own thing in the off season.
Wow.
And so, but if you put them both together and the group that did both, they improved 34 minutes. So it's almost twice as effective. So it's not like there's so much gains and you're either going to get it early or going to get it late. It was a cumulative effect. So they improved their power for that first period of time as efficiently optimized as possible. And then they build stamina, maintaining that threshold.
And so when people see the claimed time gains, that tryout training can give you, I mean, it's from studies like this.
Absolutely.
Where it was very scientifically, laid out. Fans of the scientific method will love this podcast episode, right?
Yep. So that's huge. So those who use both the in-season and the off-season improved, 34 minutes and 58 seconds. So 35 minutes improvement is huge.
So did you guys look at the Ironman distance?
For the whole distance. We didn't have any that only did the free for feedback, the free period and quit. But those that started for the whole off-season and the in-season period, they improved an average of an hour and 17 minutes and 36 seconds. And that was more than the DNS group. Those that just did the assessments, but they never finished, but they did go race.
So that gets us through where you guys really established the groundwork for using the preseason project to just learn about triathletes and how they improve, when we improve, at what rates we can improve in our training. So now we're getting into kind of the middle of the decade. You've established it. In the years 2014, 2015, 2016, year 4, 5, and 6 of preseason project. Now these were kind of transitional years for TriDot. There were some new technologies that were developed. You tried some new things. Talk to me about what came out of these middle years. The
middle years were pretty cool. There's a lot of growth, so we're institutionalizing a lot of our stuff, revamping.
Because now you've done a lot of the learning.
A lot of learning. So we're trying to increase the numbers, but not grow at a rate beyond what we can service. So the first year, it was 2014, I think we pulled on 220 athletes in the month of January, new athletes. So that was crazy, having an individual call. Yeah. And now we'll do that in a day, easy. But back then, it was retooling, learning how to handle that and not let anybody fall through the cracks. So we improved on the free for feedback. Again, the questionnaires, the feedback. We instituted new things. We're just, again, fanatical about the feedback. So reading every single one and really learning on that. That was the 2014 and 15. Just improving about that, increasing the scale, most of the growth, the same, webinars and word of mouth. So it wasn't huge growth, but it was good growth. And each time is another iteration. You have an off season, end season. We're looking at different groups, different parts of the year. Those that are starting in June and racing in
just gaining more data points.
Yeah. And doing it quicker. So just the systems in place. 2015-16, I could look back now and it was a promotional pause, basically. It was a strategic time. During that time, late 2014 is when I pulled on some outside investors to really upgrade and enhance our tool set and to get an organization that had done some big optimization engine custom work for United Airlines and PG&E and some just big time capabilities. So we spent 10 years now working on thresholds, standardizing, normalization, all the stuff, the preliminary work.
The training.
We have the data. Yeah, the athletes have gone through it, thousands of athletes pushed through, so we're very confident now we can build the thing and know that it's going to work and know where we need to put the hooks to turn the levers of volume, frequency, and duration and intensity, all those things, how to make that granular decision-making in the optimization engine. So that optimization engine was supposed to take about 6 months to build. And so we said, okay, we'll just pause a little while. Let's focus on getting this right. And
to be clear, when we talk about the optimization engine, that's what drives TriDot training.
Yeah,
that's the
insight optimization
engine. Technology that is generating what workout I should do on what days.
Correct. Correct. So that's everything. It's the data set, it's the algorithms, it's the normalization, it's all the today, the physiogenomics,
And so this is where that was developed.
all of that. Well, a lot of it was already developed to that point, but it's putting it in a thing where we're not, we still have databases, of course, but we're more doing regression analysis and stuff offline. It's not doing machine learning. It's not doing AI. It was just these big algorithms that, produce the plan. And that's where, even at that point, the developers were doing that. And I've mentioned this on another podcast. When a training phase was designed, he said he was Indian. He's in his accent. He said, "This is just magnificent." Because I was just curious on how many calculations were happening. And so I don't know if it's a query. I don't know what he did exactly. But he checked. It was in Erlang. So you can check the number of simultaneously decision threads, the things that are happening. And he says 11,000 calculations at once going on. And so that had been developed over 10 years. So we need to put that into something that can learn and adapt as we grow, and being able to to do things more real time learning. So we have different versions of the rule sets. We need to look at all athletes and apply that rule set to athletes of all time and all like there. So we put that pause on. In retrospect, it was a lot more costly. We did develop a lot of cool stuff and make it more presentable to athletes, the training stress profile, the bike to run factor. But instead of taking 6 months, that development effort took more than a year and a half.
Wow.
So it kind of wiped us there. We had a lot of athletes. We weren't spending anything. We weren't doing any promotion. And so we're kind of flatline right there growth-wise.
So the middle years weren't growing years; they were developing years.
Correct.
On
we kept doing what we were doing.
Yeah.
We kept learning, but the focus was on this. Just really enhancing is the true optimization engine at that point. Before it was data and algorithms and a lot of technology, but not in this whole next generation.
But what that did though is it really laid the groundwork for TriDot to then just surge in its growth in 2017, 2018, 2019, and where we are today. And here's the way I like to think of it, because I came on at the end of 2018, and so we're starting to get into the more modern years here. I like to think of it as you were setting the stage for TriDot to really hit its stride just in time for me to join.
That's right. It's all preparation for you.
That's the primary objective.
Yeah, you knew I was coming. So let's start talking about 2017. We're getting a lot of the athletes listening. We'll in these years we'll have recognized, hey, that's the year I came in.
Yep.
So what started happening in the year 2017 once all this was developed?
So one of the biggest changes and that we've been thinking about for then is just changing that. Before it was the off-season project. We say, here's the off-season project, and free for feedback is the way you can do it for free. And the study of the off-season and the years. Back then, all of the things we were talking about would have been the 2011 off-season, 2012, 13, 14, 15 off-season. Now we advanced it a year, and it was now, instead of the 2016 off-season, it was a 2017 preseason, because we were really focused on and developed the technology to carry the preseason work through to race and showing impact on race from what they did throughout the season, including the preseason. So restructured it, renamed it. We changed. A big change was from the rebate feedback model. So they give their feedback, they pay up front, and then get a rebate after they pass some stuff in. That was a big thing risk-wise. One is we're giving it away up front. So now it's not, them getting the money back. It's 100% free up front. Good things is more people, anyone that's skeptical, they're more likely to do that, which is a plus.
It just removed the barrier of entry.
But they didn't have skin in the game. And so there was a drop in some of the people that did anything with it. So we have more people signing up and coming in, but some of them they don't have to do anything, to get their money back. So there's no incentive, no focus. And so we did see that. But all in all, it was great. It was very beneficial for us to do that. So we added some of the qualifications, kind of enhanced that.
So when you talk about qualifications, and I think it was when I was throwing out all the questions I want to learn in this podcast, what makes an athlete qualify for the preseason project?
So one of the things is race distance, and the athlete has to be racing a Olympic 70.3 or Ironman in the next season. The reason for that oftentimes is, well, I'm a sprint athlete. Why am I excluded? And really, it goes back to the purpose of the preseason project. Preseason project is about evaluating the effectiveness of TriDot training. The reason we all do TriDot training is so that we can perform on race day. In order to evaluate the effectiveness on race day, we need to have standardized metrics that we can look at. And really the biggest challenge in evaluating sprint races is we have thousands of athletes from all over the country, but very few of them are racing in the same sprint race. And so we don't have a large enough sample size of athletes racing the same race. And then sprint races are notoriously random in their distance. There is no standardized distance that we could even say, well, this athlete raced in a race in California, and this one
Especially
raced
the swim and the bike. The swim and the bike distances are all over the map, if they're even measured correctly.
Exactly. It's a race of a certain distance is basically your sprint. So there's no way to standardize and normalize that data so that we can draw meaningful conclusions. And again, we have very high standards of the data that we use. Whereas with the Olympic, the 70.3 and Ironman distance, those are known quantities. Obviously, there's a certain level, a margin of error on those distances, but that's accounted for. So now when we have Olympic 70.3 and Ironman distance, we can compare races from anywhere. Whether that race be in California or in Florida. We standardize the data and normalize it for things like environment. So if it's at elevation in a cool temperature in Northern California versus at sea level in the heat in Florida, we can still normalize those results to where we can draw meaningful conclusions from that. And that's just not possible in the sprint race. So that's a pretty common question we get. Why not sprint? I personally love sprint races. That's kind of where I got
Sprint
my
races
start.
are a ton of fun.
We are absolutely not anti-sprint.
Yeah.
But really, there are certain challenges that lie in drawing these meaningful conclusions and meeting these high-quality standards based on the sprint racing.
So that non-standard distance is absolutely, that was the first thing.
Yeah.
They're not training stamina. They're only training functional threshold because their normal workouts are longer than the actual race effort. So there's that whole missing piece of the data where it's as long as we get to measure and evaluate both. But the other, like John said, is that sample size. And a big sprint race might be 400, 500, 600 people. We might have half that number. We've had, I guess, several different Ironman races where we might have 300 or 400 athletes doing the race. So when you have that many athletes doing the exact same race on the same day, normalizing and all that doesn't even come into play. You can do within the single race on that exact day. And so that's even better and better data. And then when you're comparing for our normalization standards, if you can have 250, 300 people racing this race, 250, 300 there, now you can evaluate that normalization between two different locations and different elevations, temperatures, humidities. And so, that sample size of doing the same race is huge. A couple other things on the qualifications or reasons for them. One is you can't have used TriDot in the past certain amount of time, and that's obviously so people are already doing this. We want to measure the incremental difference that it makes, not a continued difference over time. So you're getting people with a big break. They're all coming in fresh, and then you've done at least one triathlon before is a requirement. And that is because some people come in, they're learning the sport, they don't understand maybe training, and there's a lot of beginner gains. Going from sedentary, you have these big gains, and that's people just they've gone from not active to active. And so we want to get people who are in the sport, doing it already, and then take them from an even footing there and watch them throughout the next season.
That just helps ensure the data is just quality when we're looking at all these.
And that's also the same for the pros. The pros are going to have very minimal gains in any given time. We're talking about measuring gains over preseason periods and over race seasons. The professional athletes are at the top of their game. They've already arrived at really close to where their gains are going to be very incremental, very slow, and that's kind of the opposite of the first timer that's going to have just massive gains by doing something. So again, it's all about controlling the quality of the data. We love first timers, we love pros, but in order for this, that's why we keep it to seasoned athletes.
Yep. And so when you look at the stats that I mentioned earlier, and even the ones in this year and 2017, those don't have those beginner gains in them. So the gains we're talking about are from athletes that have been racing. They're triathletes. They're engaged in the sport.
So we're getting this quality data. We've retooled and rebranded this now as the preseason project, which is what we know it as today. With all the new technologies that have been rolled out in those developing years, and with the new rebranding, did the objectives change at all of what you were trying to learn from preseason project?
They did in some ways. It was really cool because now we could increase the scale. We could learn faster. The decisions were more granular. We had better and more baseline groups, so we could measure and demonstrate groups. And we still needed, a lot of new users to compare against that baseline group. So as we continued to do the program, we had that. We're able to look at these different athletes in different ways. One of the things that we started to do was when athletes came on, ask them if you don't use TriDot, if you're not using TriDot, what are you going to do? You're going to be coached by, are you going to train yourself? You're going to buy a coach designed custom plan for you, or are you going to have a coach designed plan and monitor with you? And so we have 4 buckets. Not only use TriDot, not use TriDot, when did you use TriDot?
Yeah.
But when you didn't use TriDot, where you self-coached, buy a custom plan, or work with a coach ongoing, or use TriDot all the way up to your race.
So you established those 4 groups, and what were the results that you saw from all the participants in the modern day preseason project?
Yeah, so it's the same stats, and it's very uncanny how similar they are from year to year. Slightly
from that original group of 100 in 2011,
100 to 228 to continue to grow. So this year, one group of that, and this is again the 70.3. Those doing only the 70.3 coming in through preseason project. This year, 2017 was 837. Their average training period over the whole time was 16 weeks for 70.3. So they're not doing other things. The group that did their training themselves, designed their own plan, they improved an average of 3 minutes and 16 seconds.
So over 4 months, somebody that decided to just kind of do their own training by themselves,
correct,
improved 3 minutes over 4 months.
Exactly. But in their mind, they're not realizing that because they don't have the benchmarking to do. They're not real. They think I couldn't do a half at all. And now I can.
Yeah.
So they went from, they have no, they're not measuring threshold and stamina and all these things. Their stamina, their threshold probably stayed consistent. Didn't improve that much. And they improved their stamina over a 16-week period.
And they may have hit their time goal and they didn't realize that they could have done it so much faster.
They have no idea of the potential because they're a sample size of 1. But they went from not being, in shape actively training or able to do a half or whatever to doing it. So that was an improvement. They couldn't do, 13-mile half marathon and 56 miles.
Yeah. So bucket 2 past that was people that purchased a custom plan but didn't have a coach.
So now they have a quality training, good principles and theories. This is the principles, theories.
On paper, it tells them what to do every day.
Looks great. And so they improved 9 minutes and 35 seconds.
Okay.
So the first one, I can give you some of the rates of comparisons in a second. But so they improved 9 minutes and 35 seconds. So almost 3 times better.
Almost, yeah.
Than the self-designed.
So past there, bucket number 3 is people who have a coach, a coach plan, and they also are paying for the coach to help them with that plan.
So they're making those adjustments along the way. So that one, instead of just the custom plan 9:35 improvement, they improved 12 minutes and 1 second. So more than 12 minutes. So
which that honestly, if you're an athlete, you're probably expecting that much.
30% more.
You're probably expecting, if I train myself, I can improve 12 minutes over a baseline group.
So that's a custom plan, adding a coach to help them. That shows the level of changes in optimization. I use the term loosely. They're not doing statistical optimization, but a coach working with that plan, they're going to improve 30% more. And that's just these ongoing decision making, again, from theory, common practice, experience of a coach. That was the average improvement.
So about 3 minutes for somebody self-coached, about 9.5 minutes for somebody who purchased a plan but didn't have a coach. Yep. And now we're saying 12 minutes for somebody who had a coach help them.
Yep.
And so then we get to TriDot. Somebody who stuck with TriDot, how much more did it go up?
This is average, again, across a large sample size, 28 minutes. So that's 8.5 times more than someone coaching themselves, 2.9 times more than someone purchasing a custom plan, and 12 minutes or 2.4 times more than the 12 minutes than a coach working with them the whole time to optimize their training. So and there's another stat out of there, the injury. They were 2.9 times less likely to get injured to the point that it interrupted.
And so this gets into TriDot's, I don't want to say claim. I mean
brand promises. There are promises. Here's what you will have.
TriDot is promising you're going to
better results.
Have better results where there it is. And less time with fewer injuries. And so 2.9 fewer injuries.
And that's where all the numbers came from these stats. We bear them out year to year.
So now we're starting to get just super caught up to the present day. And we're in just the final years here. And the year I came in as an athlete, talk to me about the changes to the preseason project in 2018.
So the structure didn't change. We was still the preseason project. The qualifications were the same. So that was all working really good. The biggest things here, it was the feedback. So you notice from year to year, it's like a very data centric, testing new things, doing different things, just the off season to the in season, now different groups of how they trained. So that's changing kind of not exactly every other year, but kind of. And then in the other years, we're looking at feedback, education, just different aspects of how, now that we have this, how do we re-educate or educate athletes for the first time and get them engaged in their training. So that was a big focus of the optimization, the education, and then building community. And that was really what John was instrumental in, that education community side of things.
So this is where we really began to expand our social network communications and community. What started off as just a small support group for preseason project athletes has now grown into a community of thousands of athletes that is well beyond preseason project, where they started as preseason project participants, and really it was the intent to have the opportunity to ask questions and share experience, that sort of thing. Now has really grown into a very valuable portion of the TriDot community. It's kind of the Monday through Friday extrapolation of I Am TriDot, whereas as on the weekend we're out on the race course, Monday through Friday we're communicating and engaging and having community.
The I Am TriDot Facebook group.
So the I Am TriDot Facebook group that now has thousands of members and hundreds of posts a day and is a great place to connect and ask and do all those things that we do, actually started off as a group of preseason project athletes there just to ask questions and be able to communicate with TriDot, ask questions, that sort of thing. So that's been really exciting to see where initially our focus was all around training and software and technology. Once those things were kind of scaled, we were able to branch out and now provide, in addition to excellent training, now we have excellent community as well. And it's probably a toss-up as to what people really appreciate more. Do they love the training? Do they love the community? And I would argue both.
Yeah, and I think this is another chance to underscore. I've been talking stats and numbers and groups, but those are real people,
real athletes.
Yeah, and so we're kind of summarizing milestones going over a decade of stuff, but every single one of these has been athletes engaging in their training in the off season and listening and caring and doing something different and learning about something. Going with the free for feedback and taking the time to fill out things and give us specific feedbacks of how we could improve. And what John's talking about now and asking for the non-coached option, all of these things have instrumentally not only changed our algorithms, but our infrastructure, the way we educate, the way this community. We didn't say, hey, let's create a community. The community created the community. We said, let's help them. And then they started engaging, answering each other's questions, encouraging each other, just trusting, here's what happened to me, here's what my success, just trust the process, believe. These slogans are not our slogans. They came from the athletes. The pricing structure came from the athletes, the non-coach option, the data. This is one of the things that I've set out from the very beginning in 2005 when I was looking at the research and saw these expert coaches and pros and all of these different people that had books and videos and all this stuff, and they were conflicting. So that's one of the things back in 2005 that I noticed is you have experts and coaches and they'd written books and they were kind of really dedicated and had to live by what they wrote, what their name was on the line, their reputation, and they were all conflicting. And I said, I want to build something that's not constrained or conflicted to the way I see it.
If we learn something and it's different, we can implement it.
Yeah, if an athlete comes in and says in one thing and four more people say, yeah, then we're going that direction. If their data comes in, what works is what the data says works, not what I wrote a book about or someone else wrote a book about or, hey, this is my mentor. It's not about any of that. It's the data. It goes where the data goes. Algorithms go where the data goes. Community goes where the athletes go. So what you see and what the athletes benefit from today is those 2013, 14, 15, 17 preseason project athletes, free for feedback athletes that are online sharing and encouraging and lifting them up. It's awesome. I get more passionate about that than I do the data.
Clearly.
And that's saying something because he gets excited about data.
He really gets excited about data.
And that ties back into the I Am TriDot story, in the I Am TriDot moniker of TriDot is based on actual data from real people. And these individuals are the building blocks of TriDot. If it weren't for these actual people doing actual training,
and actual results,
then we would be no different than anyone else.
We would be guessing at what could improve that.
Trial and error, theory, philosophy.
Exactly. So that is perhaps more than anything what sets TriDot apart is that it is based on real people, real athletes. I am TriDot. We are TriDot. That's what it is. TriDot is nothing without athlete data.
And I know something that we're excited about, and this is getting a little ahead to this year, but for 2020, preseason project for the first time is now going out into Europe. And so if you're listening to us and you're a triathlete in Europe and you found the podcast, and hey, go catch the preseason project and be one of our first batch of European athletes that start growing TriDot training and contributing to this movement, contributing to this data set that improves us all from Europe.
Absolutely. We've had athletes from about 20 different countries, and it's just spilled over word of mouth, or they just found us, I don't know how. And we've had hundreds in different countries, but we've never marketed there. We've never publicized there. So it's been super exciting, very well received. Cindy, all of our coaches are running the orientation calls, and different coaches. It's just been great feedback.
And we have the Preseason Project Europe Facebook group that's gone up that I see every single day, dozens of athletes joining, and super excited to see the data and the personalities and the athletes that come out of Europe. I know for me, it's going to be a problem, John, seeing all of them post about what races they're doing. It's just going to make me jealous. I'm going to want to fly over, and people are already like, oh, I'm doing IM Barcelona, and I'm doing this half and that half, and it's all like, oh, those places sound so much cooler than Texas. So without getting too far ahead, that was a little aside. Let's talk about 2019, because 2019 did bring some new developments to the preseason project. Tell me about that year, Jeff.
Well, that was really we've always been from the core, from the insight optimization engine out. That core is first, and then we improve everything out, whether it's education. This year, the 2019 was more about the new website, the progressive web app where you can download on your app, and a more intuitive onboarding process that guided the athletes better, fewer questions, and that led to more engagement. They got it, they understood. So that was about a year effort to go back and do the studies and focus groups and kind of figure that out. Thanks to a lot of our beta testers on that. And then just improving, the results continue to improve, adding some different things. A big thing was really taking a lot of steps forward with our machine learning. And then going into 2020, if I can jump ahead a little bit, and the work actually started as the genetics work. And that actually started the research back in 2014. So a lot of things everything that we see on the website, it didn't just get hatched there. There's years of pre-work that came to lead up to that point to introduce it. So that started in 2016. And then we had some beta testers go through earlier, beta athletes, not so much testers, but just using the software. And so I'm super excited. That's a 2020 thing, being able to, based on the athlete's actual genetics, optimize their training. And then, as we've done, take those results and build on them and further improve and optimize as the years go on. So again, athletes participating in that, uploading their genome and tracking, looking, learning, improving more, staying healthier.
And if you want to hear more about that, go check out
tridot.com/genetics. So
I was going to say podcast episode 7 where we talked all about it, but yeah, the website's good too.
The podcast, what was that? Harnessing your DNA.
Harnessing your DNA to unleash your
training potential.
Yes, your training potential. Yeah, very good, very good. Guys, we take our podcast naming very seriously here. We want to nail those names.
Great set, everyone. Let's cool down.
Really, really, really interesting to hear Jeff Boer and John Mayfield dive into the history of TriDot's preseason project. A lot of TriDot athletes discovered TriDot through the preseason project. And I don't know, it's just really cool to hear the story of how this program was developed and how deep the research project side of this goes. So Elizabeth, I know that I am a preseason project 2018 alumni. It kind of reminds me of where Ironman was running the class of your Ironman class of 2020, class of 2021 kind of thing. It's I am a preseason project 2018 alumni, and you are a preseason project 2014 alumni. So as you heard Jeff and John talking about it, what stood out to you from this main set?
There are just so many great things to say and highlight from this episode. I knew as I was listening back to it that it was going to be hard to kind of pick a couple things that were my favorite. But I tried to narrow it down to like 3 highlights. And I mean, let's just start with saying that the preseason is such an important training time. I mean, we've got a whole other podcast about not missing the most important training block of the season,
yeah.
Being the preseason. Oh, and then, the power stamina paradox episode that Jeff and John mentioned several times in the episode as well. And here we are approaching the preseason and really approaching the opportunity to build power and increase our functional threshold in each discipline. And this is something that I'm really excited about. I can't wait for my upcoming development phase. And I just think that it's so great that athletes have the opportunity to participate in the preseason project where their training is most critical for next season's performance. So I just think that this is a great opportunity for athletes, and that's really highlighted in the episode. I think another one of the things that I love most about this episode is just the highlight on the triathlon research itself and how this has been done through athletes training with TriDot. And listening to this episode gives anybody listening a better appreciation for the sample size of this data. When Jeff and John are talking about how most triathlon studies have less than 50 participants, TriDot has studied the data from tens of thousands of athletes to better understand and then refine and optimize triathlon training.
That's something that, I said it on the episode. And so as we were listening to the main set just now, I've already said this on this episode, but it was past Andrew saying it. And now current Andrew is saying it again. But when I saw that marketing ad for preseason project, I think I saw it on Facebook. It was like, hey, join, 2 months free training, try it out, And I jumped in and was like, oh, well, this is perfect. Right at the right time of year for me to try something different. Right at the right time of year for me to try structured training. Let me give this a shot. It's free, no strings attached. And I genuinely just thought it was a marketing gimmick, a very smart marketing gimmick, but because I was getting to try it, for no cost to me, and TriDot was winning the chance to win an athlete, but it's not just a marketing gimmick. And we talked about that on the episode. It actually is something where TriDot is taking the data of all the athletes involved and is able to learn from it. And so what I thought was just TriDot trying to win my business as an athlete. It was far deeper than that and a far richer experience than that. And it's funny, Elizabeth, when we go to the At the Races events, when we're on site for 70.3 and Ironman events all over the country, and we're meeting TriDot athletes, when we're doing those shakeout runs or we're going for a group ride with TriDot athletes, one of the questions I'll often ask athletes is, so how did you find TriDot? When did you start using TriDot? And I don't know, maybe 50% of the time, maybe even 3 out of 4 athletes say that they discovered TriDot because of the preseason project. And it's really amazing to see that we all came in through this because it does work great for marketing, but then it also works great for the athletes to kind of participate in the research project side of it.
Yes. Yeah. And as an athlete, I think one of the things that I've always appreciated is that research and how the training isn't based off of one person's education or experience or philosophy, but instead is truly backed by the data. And that's how TriDot's brand promises are. They aren't just claims. These statements are backed by research and results. So using TriDot, you will improve in less time with lower risk of injury. That's not just, as you would say, like a marketing claim or a marketing gimmick. Those things have been researched. There are results to prove it. And then I think the last thing that I want to highlight from this episode is when Jeff talks about the community. And gosh, that was just super cool to hear Jeff discuss how the athlete community gets him even more excited than the data. And you hear John emphasize how important of a statement that is because of how much Jeff loves data. But truly, TriDot would be nothing without the athletes, and the community is fantastic.
Well, that's it for today, folks. A big thanks to Elizabeth James for revisiting episode 13, TriDot's preseason project, how athletes helped revolutionize triathlon training. Many new topics coming up on the show, but thankful for a week to look back on past preseason projects and to get excited about it coming back around again, particularly with the addition of the Remote Racing Preseason Project Series. Huge thanks to Delta G for partnering with us on today's episode. To learn more about the performance-boosting benefits of Delta G ketones, head to deltagketones.com and use the code TriDot20 for 20% off your order. If you have a question or a topic you would like to hear us talk about on a future show, head to TriDot.com/podcast and click on Submit Feedback to let us know what you're thinking. We'll do it all again soon. Until then, happy training.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe and share the TriDot podcast with your triathlon crew. For more great Tri content and community, connect with us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Ready to optimize your training? Head to tridot.com and start your free trial today. TriDot, the obvious and automatic choice for triathlon training.